Dr. Scott Bonn. He's a criminologist, he's a professor, and he's also a TV analyst, public speaker, and author. He's the author of the best-selling popular culture book, Why We Love Serial Killers, The Curious Appeal of the World's Most Savage Murderers. He's also provided expert commentary and analysis for a number of high-profile true crime TV shows and documentaries. Scott, it's a pleasure to have you with me.
Thank you, Sheena. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Well, Scott, I don't know if you've been following the news from Iran, but in recent weeks, women in my country have come forward using whatever mean they can, Twitter, Instagram, social media websites, and they've put out narrations where they've described how they've been sexually harassed, how they've been abused, and how they've been raped by high-profile men in my country, also artists, authors, even women's rights activists. And in Iran, unfortunately, we do not have a law regarding sexual harassment. And so it's very difficult to even understand. There's not a definition of what is the difference between rape and sexual harassment. And since you've studied criminology, can you give me an explanation as to what does sexual offenses include?
Absolutely. And first of all, I just want to say, you know, these women who are coming forward, and also their advocates such as yourself, are very brave women, and I give you a tremendous amount of credit for what you're doing, because this is a terrible situation. Now to your question, yeah, these are different but overlapping categories, and I'm going to give you the legal definition here in the United States. It can vary around the world, but in the United States, rape involves actual forced sexual intercourse involving penetration. So it's very specific. That's rape. Sexual assault, on the other hand, is unwanted sexual touching or contact that falls short of either rape or attempted rape. Okay, so sexual assault involves contact, but not the act of sexual intercourse itself. And then harassment is an even broader category that does not necessarily involve touching. It could involve intimidation. It could involve threats, verbal sorts of assault, not necessarily touching. But that doesn't mean, especially if it's in the workplace or if it's in a situation with a powerful male, it doesn't mean that it's not very hurtful and harmful, even though it doesn't involve necessarily physical contact. So does that clarify for you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Scott, when it comes to sexual harassment and sexual offences in general, unfortunately, in my country, even talking about sex and talking about gender and talking about differences and everything related to intercourse or harassment is considered taboo, and it brings a lot of shame into the victim himself or
Certainly.
herself. So I want you to tell me, what is it, because I understand that this victimhood, it's something that happens in the West as well. And so when we come to describe the victim, the perfect victim, there's a category that they have to fall into. I want to understand from a criminological aspect, where does the true victim or this whole victimhood come into play?
Yeah, well, that's, you know, we call it victim condemnation or blaming the victim. That's not exclusive to your culture. I mean, that has happened throughout U.S. history, and it continues to happen. And what it's based upon these patriarchal notions that a woman who is sexually assaulted somehow wants it, you know, that she's somehow fantasizing about this and is in some way sexualizing herself and bringing this on. You know, you'll hear especially, you know, very patriarchal traditional males say, well, how was she dressed? How was the victim dressed? Was she dressed in a very erotic or, you know, or sexual way? And that's as if to say that just because a woman has a short skirt on her and she's out at a nightclub, that she's looking to be raped, which is obviously not, not the case. But that's the sort of a very disturbed patriarchal male perspective, traditional male perspective. So it's as if the victim is not really a victim. So I understand that, and we continue to fight that in the U.S. Court system. There's a real hesitance on the part of prosecutors to put the victim on to tell their story, for fear that the defense attorney, the one who's defending the alleged rapist, the defense attorney will put them through hell on the stand, and make them relive the rape and punish them again, and which is, it's just wrong. That's not justice. That's persecution rather than justice. So yes, I fully understand your perspective and why it's such a dilemma.
And when it comes to talking about sexual harassment, also, I would like to know, can we describe these sexual offenders? Can we put them in different categories as to what type of people actually commit, sexual offences against women? Do they have specific profiles, for example? Because in one of the stories, the police in Iran has actually asked women to come forward regarding one rape instance where there were different narrations from different women. And so they arrested the rapist, the alleged rapist, and he confessed to his crime. But he, first of all, suggested that it's for the thrill of it, that he raped women. And then he went on to say, well, I'm a sadist and I do it because I'm a sadist. And I want to understand, what is it really that makes a man or even a woman commit rape?
Well, it's a great question, and there's another myth that exists out there that it's a crime of sex. And while the act itself may be a sexual act, the underlying motive is almost always about power, control, and domination. And so that's why you may see these powerful males in very dominant positions, taking advantage of powerless, or at least less powerful, women. So it's a way of really exerting power and control. And that goes with harassment. That goes with sexual assault. It's the idea that someone can take advantage. I am so powerful. I am at such a higher level in status, prestige, authority than you, that I can touch you. I can violate you in any way that I so choose, because I have the right and the power to do so. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so it's that it's really, as I said, power, domination, control. That is then acted out in a sexual act, but the sex itself is not the goal. It's about the power and the domination. Now, you mentioned the thrill. I would suggest that in most cases, the thrill is secondary. The thrill is the outcome. The primary motive is the domination and the control, and then once achieved, you get maybe a euphoria or a sense of a high as a result. But that's not the goal in and of itself. I really think the goal is typically about power and domination. And if you think about it, that's why here in the States, for example, we find so much sexual harassment in the workplace. So it doesn't involve touching, but it involves male and authority figures thinking that they can say anything they want to their female employees and their female subordinates. Oh, hey, I like the way you're dressed today. You're looking pretty sexy. Well, that's just wrong. You wouldn't say that to a man. You wouldn't say it to one of your male counterparts. And it doesn't seem, maybe it doesn't seem like it's too harmful, but it actually is, because it's saying you are in a lower, position than me.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, what was really interesting about what you said was, when it comes to victim shaming in America, they would ask questions like, what were you wearing, or how were you behaving, or were you drunk? Did you did you drink alcohol, or were you high, or whatever? But in Iran, we live in a society where, you know, this Islamic regime has forced women to cover themselves. So if you look at women in Iran, in the workplace especially, when you see, we have also a report talking about women, female reporters in Iran, that 90% of them have experienced some sort of sexual harassment. Either it's been touching, sexual assault, or most of it has been verbal. So my question is, in a society like Iran, where women are forced to cover, and the pretext is, if you're covered, you're going to, you know, have some sort of defense against, you know, ill-minded men looking at you. So I want to understand, how can we explain it here? Can we just say that's a myth about, you know, what a woman wears has got nothing to do with, you know, a man actually making an advance, a sexual advance towards her?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of, I think you're asking a couple of questions there. One of them is, yes, I don't think that the way that a woman is dressed has anything to do with the act of rape. If anything, what you're suggesting in your culture is that men are weak and therefore need to cover up these sexual beings, or they're going to act on their primal instincts and engage in rape. So what does that say about men, you know, in the first place, that they need to do this? It doesn't say very good things about men. And I would argue the very fact that women have to be covered in your society is an act of domination and control to begin with. It's already, they're already controlling women's appearance by forcing them to dress this way. So that's you know, once again, as I said, this is all about domination and control. It starts there. And you know, and then ultimately the act of rape itself, I think, is just an extension of that. We males in this society have the power to do whatever we want. So I don't see that it's in any way inconsistent. You know, the fact that women are forced to dress this way doesn't say very good things about men. And it says that they're attempting to dominate and control, and then taking it a step further. Well, even though you're covered, we can still do whatever we want. It's just an extension of that, as far as I can see.
And Scott, how far do you think it pushes this, you know, it encourages this kind of behavior when you see in this society, being a patriarchal society, being a conservative society where it favors men, how much do you think these misogynist rules that we have in Iran, whereas as a woman, when you're a girl and you're not married, you are the property of your father and he makes decisions for you, and then you get married, then you're property of your husband and he makes decisions, he allows for you to work. How much do you think that encourages men to get away with sexual offenses against women?
Well, it does. I mean, it sends the signal that women are objects. They're not really individual full people. They are objects that are the own, you know, that are owned and at the discretion, at the mercy of men to do with whatever they want. So yes, I would say that the what we call it, laws and mores of your society perpetuate it and exacerbate it, make it even worse. It's basically saying, look, women really aren't full people. They're objects. They're our property.
And what do you think about improving this? I know this is also a challenge. It's not just about my country, but it's a challenge across the world where it comes to when a woman comes forward and, you know, sexual offenders wouldn't just rape you in the middle of a square. So they do it in private areas where no one's around, nobody sees. So what is the process when it comes to that? How is a woman supposed to prove what has happened to her? If she's been sexually harassed in a way, if she's been assaulted, if she's been touched inappropriately, isn't that something that, you know, your country's also working towards?
Oh yeah. Well, you know, that's the old he said, she said. You know, if it happens in private and there are no witnesses, then it's one, you know, person's word against the other. And then, you know, if you live in a male dominant society, patriarchal society, who are you going to believe, the powerful male or the powerless woman? And you know, maybe, you know, in a very grassroots way, in a fledgling way, maybe you're working toward what, you know, the Me Too movement, you know, that exists in Western culture. where you know, women are coming out and supporting one another and saying, yes, you're not the only one. This happened to me too. And I think that that is something that's necessary. That kind of solidarity is necessary, and publicity, and to keep it in the public eye. It has to be in the public eye, because if it's just one case and it goes away, well, people forget very, very quickly. So it's going to need it, and it's going to take very, very strong, brave people to make this happen, especially in your culture, because it is so oppressive. It's not easy in Western society to go up against these powerful men, but I think it's even more difficult in your society.
Absolutely. And Scott, something that women in my country also get a backlash on is false accusations, what they supposedly claim that there are false accusations against men, and then they can actually sue these women for defamation. I want to see, what do you know, do you have statistics as to, you know, how many women come and put themselves through, you know, this pain and, you know, even shaming, just to falsely accuse a man of sexual harassment or rape?
Well, it's changing, you know, in our society, in U.S. society at least, it's been changing over time, and the requirements. There used to be a requirement that unless a woman could demonstrate actual physical damage and harm, you know, bruising, bleeding, etc., that there was no rape. You know, the assumption of the justice system was, well, if no harm, no foul. If there's no sign, then there was no rape. Which, of course, we know that that's not reality. You could have forced sexual intercourse or other forms of sexual assault without necessarily leaving signs of bruising or bleeding.
The instance of this man that they've arrested, he would drug them. So he would put drugs into their drinks, and, you know, they would pass out and they would wake up to find that they've been raped.
Right. Exactly. So that is a problem. You know, that is a problem. And it's, the laws have changed in the United States. Now you don't have to demonstrate that. But it's very important. And I don't know whether, you know, I don't know your system, your legal system. Is there any mechanism if a woman is raped? Is there a place that she can go? Like here in the United States, there are rape kits. You know, if a woman goes in and says that she has been raped, they immediately take DNA and you know, and all sorts of physical evidence to demonstrate. Is there anything like that in your society?
They've started doing something similar here, where they take parts of if there's semen left over, or I don't know, things like that. They try to take samples, or I don't know, under the nails if they find, you know, things, or hair or things like that. They've started with rape, but you know, also there are some restrictions, whereas you need to, like, witnesses as to rape happened. So
so unless there's a witness, they won't do it.
Yeah.
They won't. Oh, that, well, see, I mean, many rapes occur without any witnesses.
So yeah, there are restrictions in that. And what would your advice be, Scott, as a criminologist and somebody who studied crime? You know, with all the restrictions that women in my society have, many people, many actually open-minded men, out of fear, thinking, because, you know, this system, this patriarchy and this misogyny, not only the conservatives have taken advantage of, but actually open-minded men who, you know, as I told you, we have instances of women's rights activists, male women's rights activists, who have now been accused of rape and accused of sexual harassment. So everybody's somehow taking advantage of this system, the men in my society. And so many of them are trying to invite women to silence. But, and the law, or they're saying, go to the laws, the same laws that are against us, the same laws that are limiting us in every aspect. Go to the same laws and ask them to, you know, try to sue us But we know that it's not possible because, unfortunately, if the legal system was something that could be relied upon, then we wouldn't have these kinds of crimes happening. What do you think we should do? What would your advice be to women?
Well,
Should they be silent about these crimes that are happening? Should they give a pass to men just because, oh, they didn't know, because it's not talked about, it's taboo? What are we supposed to do?
definitely not. Definitely not. The last thing I think people should do is be silent. But I recognize there's no, you know, how can you possibly, the legal system that is perpetuating and possibly even engaging in, you know, in these very acts, how can you go to them and say, change the system? I mean, it's not going to happen. I think you need the equivalent of a Me Too movement here. You need to get the media, supportive media and compassionate media who are willing to let these women tell their stories. And you need to try to find some people who have influence, who are open to this. People who have, you know, who have access and influence to the powers that be. I mean, I understand you can't go to the heads of the state, but there must be gatekeepers, people who have influence, who have access, who may be open-minded to, you know, to the cause. And you have to build a grassroots movement. This is not going to happen from the top down. This is going to happen from the bottom up, a grassroots movement, and move upward. And but you have to try to get some people with some you know, influence. Maybe people in the entertainment field who may be more open-minded, people in the film, television industry who also have access to the media, because the message has to get out there, and it has to be sustained. It can't be just a you know, a short-term thing, or nothing's going to happen. Those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you very much. Well, Scott, it was great having you. It was great. I loved your insight. And also, it's very important for women in my country to understand that, you know, it's not their fault. Unfortunately, they've been told so many times that you're to be blamed for what is happening to you, the way you talk, the way you behave. And so, unfortunately, this culture of victim shaming and the rape culture is very predominant here. So I hope that what you said brings some sort of insight to women in my country, where they realize that, of course, this is a challenge that the world is dealing with, but, you know, they need to be strong and to support each other.
Absolutely, and do not let anyone tell you that you are wrong and that you are to blame, because you're not. You are truly the victim, and solidarity, and supporting one another and coming out and being vocal is the way to get this message across.
Well, it was great to have you, Dr. Scott Bonn, criminologist, professor, TV analyst, public speaker, and author of the best-selling popular culture book, Why We Love Serial Killers. It was an absolute pleasure to have you with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.